Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me. So yesterday, we talked about the Democrats losing registered voters to the Republican Party. Now, there are a lot of Democratic pundits talking about why that is and what can be done about it. Some of them, what they say is extremely out of touch. Some of what they say is okay. I still don't think they quite have a good plan for what actually went wrong and what they need to do about it. I think they're still beholden to their special interest groups who want to push an agenda and who are really out of touch with where the culture is at and where the majority of Americans are. They still act like turning America into a European liberal area is going to work, but you can see the chaos that's going on over there, and Americans have rejected that whole path. So they don't quite understand why, but they are working on it, and I applaud them for that. Now, I take a little bit of joy in it, but ultimately, I don't really want the Democratic Party to collapse or anything like that. I've had a lot of respect for the Democratic Party throughout my life. I've always seen them as the intellectuals, the ones who had good ideas and were learned and stuff. Now it seems like they've been hijacked by these radical whack jobs, but the majority of Democrats are not like that. It's just that the people who speak on their behalf and the people who are the leaders are out of touch. They're elitists who pretend to not be, and nobody trusts them anymore. So they need to figure out a way out of that. And what I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna run down some of the reasons, not all. There's a lot of reasons why people are leaving the Democrat Party and going to the Republican and why Trump won. I'm gonna run down some that I think are the more major ones, and a lot could be said about all these points that I'm gonna be making, but I'm gonna hopefully make it clear as to what my opinion is. I'm going to talk about some of the issues that caused their collapse, which there are a lot of. But to start off, let's take a look at this clip of this guy talking about why the Democrats lost.
That doesn't give you particular hope at the moment, which is the immediate future of the Democratic Party. You've been very critical of the Democrats veering into identity politics and away from the interest of the working class, of working people. Here's what you wrote recently in The Atlantic. The triumph of the Trump reaction, which is what you call this whole political moment we're in. The triumph of the Trump reaction should put an end to two progressive illusions that have
All right, sorry, but I think that's a great way to put it, actually. Trump reaction. I do think that Trump is a reaction to the craziness that went on in the Democratic Party over the last, at least 4 years. I mean, longer than that, but it got really intense the last 4 years. They made a lot of people mad. They were tone deaf. They tried to cram their agenda down everybody's throat, and Trump was the one who would put an end to that. And so that's really what the appeal of Trump was, not necessarily Trump himself.
Considerably strengthened it. One is the notion that identity is political destiny. For a long time, the Democratic Party regarded demographic change in America, the coming minority majority, as a consoling promise during interim Republican victories. As the country turned less white, it would inevitably turn more blue. Not true. And by the way, you mentioned a second illusion about majoritarianism, which you say by this theory, the Democratic Party is kept out of power by a white Republican minority that thwarts the popular will through voter suppression, gerrymandering, judicial legislating, filibuster, the composition of the Senate and Electoral College. By this thinking, the ultimate obstacle to the American promise is the Constitution itself. That doesn't sound like a winning cause. Particularly,
especially now that we're hearing about some Republican legislators who want a second constitutional convention,
right,
and who are pushing for it because they want to turn the Constitution into Project 2025.
Right. So why did Kamala Harris lose in the framework of what you're writing here?
There are other things outside the framework, I think, that had a lot to do with it. Inflation, the border,
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden waiting far too long
Right.
to do what he should have done all along. And then
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, those are by far the most important reasons. Yes.
Kamala Harris being installed by party elites instead of nominated by a democratic process. So all of that. But I think the larger problem is the Democratic Party has become the party of the establishment, of the status quo, of the institutions, which is not the worst thing to be. They need defending, but they also need reforming, and not along the lines that the party has been pursuing, which has been.
Yeah, they need to be reformed by more DEI initiatives and getting more transgenders in leadership. I mean, that's what they think what they thought reform was. You know, they know they need to be effective and efficient and not full of corruption. And we can all agree on that.
Basically, to believe that the most basic identity of a citizen is group identity based on race, gender, sexuality. And that is how.
So basically, based on this whole identity politics thing didn't work because turns out a bunch of racist, sexist, misandrist policy ideas and opinions that lead to your policies, which then lead to racist, sexist, and anti-men policies. That's not a winning combination. Gosh, who would have thought? Who would have thought that would have made basically everybody mad?
The party's organized itself. It's how it's seen its constituents, how it's come to various positions on cultural issues. And I think in doing so, it has lost a large number of ordinary Americans who don't see themselves primarily in those terms, who are mostly working class, middle class, and who used to be the backbone of the Democratic Party. If you look at the party 50 years ago and today, it's almost done a reversal with the Republicans losing its working class base and inheriting college-educated professionals who used to be the Republican Party's base. And that, to some prognosticators, seemed like a good direction to go in, and it has turned out not to, because there are a lot of non-college educated Americans of all races, and they are moving toward the Republican Party, and that is not a winning strategy.
Something that's really notable in the last round was that the elites, New York, Washington, Los Angeles, San Francisco, surprised to the point of being shocked that Black people, Black men in particular, Hispanic men in particular, would vote for somebody, Donald Trump, who has said outrageous, offensive, racist things about those groups. What are you taking from that?
See, this is how racist the Democratic Party has become. They can't believe that Black men would vote for a white man because they see everything through this stupid, weird lens that they have these lenses on that just see racism everywhere. They see sexism everywhere. And so how could a woman vote for a white man? How could a Black man vote for Donald Trump? They just see that, and that tells you right there that they really don't understand what's going on. Because the Republican Party doesn't see things like that. They don't say, oh, we need to have 3 Black people, 2 Hispanics, 3 white women, 3 Black, and try to cobble together something retarded like that. It's based on how you perform. It doesn't matter. Okay, you're really good at doing this thing. Okay, great. Oh, you're Black. Okay, fine, great. You know, that's so. But the Democratic Party is so out of touch that they still see a bunch of racists running around. They see racism behind everything, and it's because they're the ones who are the racists, and that's how they make policies. They make policies based on race, so they think that everybody's doing it. And they can't understand that the majority of people don't give a crap about race-based policies, sex-based policies. They want good policies that work and that are effective and that make us a better country and make us all richer.
And what are you taking from both that reality and also the surprise of the
Yeah.
elites.
Well, they shouldn't be that surprised because this has been a trend over the last few election cycles. So you have to have pretty much wiped your mind of the memory of those demographic numbers from the last couple of elections to think that this couldn't happen. It's been happening for a while. It really happened this year because if you look at, say, where I live, New York, the borough where Harris's numbers went up over Biden's in 2020 was Manhattan, the most white borough. The group, over $100,000 income. So in other words, well-to-do white people. Whereas in Queens and the Bronx, where it's a non-white majority.
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly right. The Democratic Party has become the party of the elite white people. And they alienated everybody else because they thought they were smarter, thought they were more virtuous, more noble. They understood, and they needed to tell everybody how things were supposed to be because they were the ones who were like, yay, transgender and all that kind of stuff. And the rest of us were just dopes that just needed to take our marching orders from them. And because they have, their master's and PhD in gender studies or some bullshit thing, that they were the cream of the crop. They were the ones who were in authority because of it. And we wholeheartedly rejected that nonsense.
Trump improved his numbers
Asian also, by
considerably.
the way.
Asian, Hispanic, Black. So I was standing in a giant crowd outside Madison Square Garden right before the election, trying to get in to hear the final Trump, the big New York rally where all kinds of crazy things were being said. I couldn't get in. There were too many people. But I had a maybe more interesting experience, which was I was standing in a group of 3 guys who were Trinidadian immigrants who lived in Flatbush, which is a very Black and Latino part of Brooklyn, immigrant part of Brooklyn. They were wearing full MAGA regalia. And I said, why are you here? Why are you for him? The price of eggs, we're not respected around the world. And that stuff he says, we just don't listen to it. We don't take it that seriously. And by the way, there are a lot of people like us in Flatbush. They just don't wear the MAGA hats, but they're there.
Yeah, they don't understand this. So this is a thing. It's a thing. A lot of these people who come from other countries want strong male leadership. They want a leader that inspires them, a leader that seems like they're going to be able to handle things and take care of things. And Trump's like that. You can compare that to Gavin Newsom. And how is somebody supposed to get behind him or Kamala? They don't have a presence or an authority. You don't feel like you can trust them to actually get things done. They seem weak. They seem wishy-washy. They seem like they'll change their opinion on a whim, and you can't trust that. So the desire is for somebody who can lead.
Right. And they have to be listened to and taken seriously and not told you have false consciousness, you're voting against your interests, all the things that Democrats have said about people like that. How about hearing what they say and then thinking, how can we appeal to them without betraying our values?
You think the Democrats are going to reform in order to beat the next Republican?
I don't think so.
Oh, this guy is not optimistic at all. Not at all. He's just like, no, the Democrats, they're cooked. They're done. Because, and he'll explain why, but that is really kind of depressing.
I think it'll take longer than that because, first of all, I don't see the immediate aftermath of the election moving in that direction. I don't see a kind of party-wide sense we have to do something different, which is what happened after '88, when for the 3rd straight time, a Republican wiped out a Democrat for president. And because these are entrenched ways of thinking and ways of organizing the party, and they can't be uprooted quickly. There are interest groups whose entire purpose, not just financial, but idealistic, is to push the party in the direction that I think has cornered it in a way that makes it less and less popular with the broad American public. And they're not going to go away either. The donors who are the financial backbone may not feel the economic pressures that ordinary people do, and may be more concerned with the cultural issue. So
$1 million buys a lot of eggs.
Yes, it does.
That's my slogan.
I think
going
that
forward.
could be a good one for 2028 if anyone wants to grab it.
Yeah. I'm going to do something terrible to you now.
Okay, so I thought that was a pretty interesting clip to start off with, because this guy, at least he seems to know what's going on. Now, I think that any kind of talk about why the Democrats are in a death spiral and why Trump won the election probably needs to start with discussion about COVID. Now, I don't want to get real deep into it because it's kind of boring to talk about, but that was a real issue, you know, and it turned a lot of people away. It essentially locked people in their houses, told them they couldn't be around the people they love, told them they couldn't go to the places that they wanted to go, closed businesses, bankrupted people, and somehow that wasn't fascistic. But Trump doing things like sending in the National Guard, which is totally within his right, somehow that's fascistic. No one's as fascistic as the Democratic Party. They would love nothing more than to tell you everything you have to do and force you to do it. And they were just loved doing that in COVID. So let's take a look at some of the crap that they did and some of the problems that they caused that drove people away.
And an Orange County family is seeking answers from a local Bakersfield hospital tonight after they say that the hospital told them that they could visit a dying loved one, but have since changed their mind due to COVID-19 restrictions. 23BC's Kylie Walker is live in Bakersfield at Mercy Hospital Southwest and shares more about the family's concerns.
Good evening, Alex. The family tells me that their father is currently at this hospital suffering from a stroke, but his time is limited, which is why the family is trying so desperately to be by his side once more.
And I don't understand. It's like, gosh, just give me a few minutes. Let me say my goodbyes.
Catherine Grenier says her father was admitted to Mercy Hospital Southwest on Wednesday due to a stroke, and that nurses told the Grenier siblings that their father is in grave condition.
He is not going to make it to Christmas.
Right. When we were face to face, she would pull out paperwork, she would look at it and say, he's not expected to live very long.
And due to his condition, Grenier says the hospital told her she could visit her father in the first place, so she flew in from Utah, but now she says the hospital won't let her in due to visitor restrictions from COVID-19.
I just don't understand. You said we could see him, so why can't we see him?
Grenier says she's getting very little communication from the hospital, and she just wants answers as the family remains in a standstill.
And I've called. No one will call me back. The hospital administrator won't call me back. The nurse won't call me back.
She says the last they heard from nurses was on Sunday that their father opened his eyes. And we did reach out to Mercy, but have not heard back at this time. But in a statement to 23ABC, the state public health department said, quote, visitors are essential to the mental health of patients who are at end of life. Grenier says they let one of the 9 siblings visit a couple of times, but haven't let anyone else. And the public health department goes on to write, quote, for their continued mental health and well-being, the California Department of Public Health recommends that one visitor be allowed to be present with the patient. A single visitor does not need to be designated, provided that only one visitor is present at the time.
So I had the same thing happen to a friend of mine, and it was really sad. That's not really a thing that we remember happened, but there's also, not only so you think that this woman who wasn't allowed to see her dad, if she was a Democrat, stayed a Democrat? I don't think so. You do something like that to somebody, they're probably running. But not only was it a problem with separating loved ones and not letting them see each other, gather for birthday parties and all that kind of stuff. But it also was about tanking businesses.
As of the beginning of 2020, I had 3 fully functioning restaurants, and the Pegu Club was in its 15th year, and we were still operating, and no reason to be closing those doors other than what's happened with this pandemic.
In the past few months, small businesses have been clobbered by the coronavirus pandemic. Due to stay-at-home orders, a small online presence, or high overhead costs, many businesses have had to close their doors for good.
We just looked at the numbers for that, and it became clear very quickly that was not a business that was going to be able to recover. And so we just saved ourselves a lot of time and agony and gave it a very sad and unceremonious, goodbye. And it makes us angry, for not just the business that we had to close, but for the interruption of the success that we were experiencing from decades of hard work. And we were very good at what we do. And it's devastating, and it's sad, and it makes me angry to lose all of this overnight.
Many others could face the same fate. According to a survey by Main Street America, 7.5 million small businesses are at risk of closing in the next 5 months. The 4 business owners we spoke to employed 30 people. Now they're out of work.
Yeah, so you think that the Democrats did that? So are we supposed to think that these people are going to just forget about this once it's done? They're not going to forget about it. That's to change their whole lives. They made them go bankrupt. Who knows? Lose their house. Who knows how bad it got for these people? Nobody really checked in on them. And, it's not only that, but it's also people with kids, and the way that the school affected
and he is instrumental
their children
in sort of the education
children.
establishment here.
With classes back in session and students in seats, it's hard to believe it's been 5 years since COVID-19 took hold.
No, I can't believe that.
When schools closed down in March 2020, students like Alan Rodriguez Granados went home not knowing how long spring break would last.
I remember I was really happy because I didn't have to go to school anymore, and I could just stay home and chill.
As coronavirus spread, learning shifted online. Transition tough on both sides of the computer screen.
It was kind of hard. I didn't really learn much, but the things that I did learn did stick. So I was grateful for that.
Teachers worked extremely hard to modify their instruction from being in person to this remote hybrid environment. And in all transparency, it reduced the quality of instruction that was occurring compared to their in-person environment.
Rhonda Hannaford is the Deputy Commissioner of Student Excellence with the Colorado Department of Education. She says Colorado students experienced a 1.5 years of disrupted learning during the pandemic. Even after they returned, it wasn't easy.
I felt underprepared and not ready for what was going to come up. I was able to catch on to new materials pretty quick, so I wasn't really lagging too far behind.
Reading and math scores statewide dropped down sharply. Chronic absenteeism in students spiked from 22% to 35%, while mental health tanked. Students, especially middle and high schoolers, reported high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. And some kids got left even further behind.
We saw that student achievement gaps widened, particularly for our marginalized student groups. Within that, we saw that there were pre-existing declines between our different groups of students, and that was further exacerbated and accelerated as a result of the pandemic.
Learning losses that teachers like Jeffrey Almond felt in the classroom.
What that does psychologically for us and our kids, I would worry more about that, sociologically or something, the impact of that and what's happened since, versus you missed out on 30 days of math. At a certain point, some of those things start to seem kind of insignificant. There's bigger things to be worried about than you're a little bit behind in reading.
I think it was everybody.
All right, so these kids now are becoming voters. And it's as a shock to everybody, the young demographic went Republican. That has almost I don't know, maybe that's happened before, but the trope is you vote liberal when you're Democrat and liberal when you're young, and then as you get older and you get more boring, you become more conservative because you have more property and valuables and things like that. So you want to protect them or whatever. But this is the exact opposite. This is the young people believe 20 and under, maybe 5 and under, voted in higher numbers for Republicans than boomers did, which is pretty surprising. So that's,
I could feel like some people were struggling, some people were not.
So not only that, with the students, with the businesses, with the loved ones, all these problems that the Democrats created with their response to COVID, not only did that push people over to the Republican Party, but it was also the blatant hypocrisy of the Democrats. Like this, for example.
The science that says you must test, trace, treat, you must wear your mask, you must have sanitation, you must wear your mask, you must wear your mask.
Yeah. So Nancy Pelosi here going to her
nationwide continue to struggle.
Going to her party with it, where she wasn't supposed to be at, wearing a mask, without wearing a mask, like she was telling everybody else to do. Just that kind of the elites, and people just got sick of it.
Robbie, what's on your radar? Is it possible that the pandemic is over? If this year's annual Met Gala is any indication, the answer to that question depends on whether you're a commoner or a member of the ruling class. For most of us, the pandemic is very much not over. If you live in a southern state, Florida, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, you might still be reeling from COVID-19. Some of the hospitals nearby are probably hitting capacity as thousands of sick, unvaccinated COVID patients fill their beds. But let's say you live elsewhere, in an area of the country where the disease is well under control. Let's say you're vaccinated or have antibodies from a prior infection. According to the science, you could, in theory, safely resume normal life. You can discard your mask knowing there's very little chance that you'll get sick and very little chance you would spread COVID-19 to someone else. You have almost no chance, very low chance, of suffering severe disease or death. Is the pandemic over for you? It should be, but probably it isn't. That's because the government health officials now in charge of the entire country aren't ready to let the pandemic end for most people, even if they're extremely safe from the disease. Indeed, the government is imposing ever stricter mitigation measures by the day. Last President Biden issued a vaccine mandate for 80 million private sector workers, with no exceptions for the naturally immunized. And he isn't letting up on masks either. His new plan requires that strong mask requirements remain in place. Locally, policymakers have taken the same approach. Consider Washington, D.C., where I live. Our 7-day average for COVID deaths is 0. By any reasonable measure, the emergency has ended in the nation's capital. Our vaccination rate is high, and the vaccines are working. But when you enter any indoor space, you are still required by law to wear a mask. Unless you're DC Mayor Muriel Bowser, that is. The city's mayor, who reimposed the mask mandate in late July, has thrice been caught maskless at public events, including her own birthday party and a wedding. Here she is just a few days ago. She makes the rules, we follow them. This has been a recurring theme of the pandemic, of course. California Governor Gavin Newsom, who recently survived his recall attempt, imposed brutal restrictions on his citizens and demanded extreme social distancing, but had no compunction about attending a lavish private dinner with a lobbyist at the luxurious French Laundry. At the start of the pandemic, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot told city residents that they should delay getting haircuts. Getting your roots done is not essential, she said. Did you catch that? Your roots are not essential. She wasn't including herself. Mayor Lightfoot absolutely went out for a haircut and, when caught, justified it by saying, I'm the public face of the city. I'm on national media and I'm out in the public eye. This reality, one law for America's political aristocracy and another for the commoners, has been brutally obvious for much of the pandemic. But I'm not sure it was ever quite so galling until earlier this week, when celebrities, athletes, and politicians, everyone from Jennifer Lopez to Megan Rapinoe to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, dressed up in outlandish costumes for the Met Gala, an annual celebrity fashion fundraiser at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. The theme this year was In America, a lexicon of fashion, though many attendees looked like they had walked off the set of the Hunger Games. As is typical, some of the celebrities opted to make political statements. AOC and Representative Carolyn Maloney's were particularly on the nose. They literally wrote the message directly onto their clothing. Maloney's dress said equal rights for women, and AOC's said tax the rich. Many conservative commentators asserted that AOC was guilty of hypocrisy for decrying the wealthy while partying with them at a celebrity event that cost.
Yeah, shocker. Hypocrisy. That's that's how it goes. The Democrats are interested in making rules for you, rules that you have to follow. They're elite, so they don't have to follow the rules, but you do. And if you don't, then they're going to bring it down on you. They're not concerned about people. I mean, they're concerned about themselves. They want to make two sets of rules, double standards, one for you, one for them. And they can justify it any way they want to. They often justify it by claiming that it's, oh, this is for good purposes, like locking everybody in their house during COVID. Oh, because, mental health, and we've got it, or health crisis, national health crisis, and we've got to stop this. It's going to kill everybody. It's going to be blah, 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 blah. So then they can always appear that their misdeeds are actually virtue. So just a quick recap, in March of 2020, that's when government leaders told Americans that it would take 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And the idea was that there would be a brief pause and would keep hospitals from being overwhelmed. In reality, those 2 weeks became months. And in many blue states like California, New York, Illinois, and New Jersey, restrictions dragged on until late 2021, almost 2 years. Schools were closed far longer than in Europe or red states like Florida and Texas, which reopened much earlier. Restaurants, gyms, and churches were closed while liquor stores, casinos, and corporate giants like Walmart and Amazon stayed open. And so we're wondering why people are fleeing from blue states to red states. Here's another reason why. So parents were forced into at-home teaching while kids fell behind academically. Test scores dropped to the lowest levels in decades. Many kids developed anxiety and depression from isolation. Parents felt robbed of their children's future by policies they couldn't control. Local businesses, restaurants, salons, mom and pop shops were crushed, often permanently closed. Meanwhile, corporations with political pull were labeled essential and raked in record profits. That imbalance made people feel like the government was picking winners and losers, and they were the losers. Millions reported rising depression, alcoholism, and substance abuse. The feeling was they locked us in our homes, destroyed our routines, and then ignored the fallout. Americans couldn't gather with family, attend church, or celebrate milestones like weddings. Like weddings and funerals, people felt stripped of their most basic freedoms in the name of safety. And this is how it's always going to come from the Democratic side. They'll take away whatever they can, and it will always be under the name of safety and care and concern and emotionalism and these kinds of things. That's the Trojan horse that they sneak in with their authoritarianism. Family businesses couldn't open, but Hollywood was given waivers to keep filming. Kids masked outdoors at recess while governors and mayors went maskless at expensive restaurants. The rules were contradictory and insulting. Ordinary parents made their kids mask up all day in school while Nancy Pelosi went maskless. Gavin Newsom dined maskless. Barack Obama threw a giant birthday bash on Martha's Vineyard. To regular people, this was the final insult. The people giving the orders didn't live under them. The feeling wasn't just frustration, it was oppression. People felt trapped, dictated to, and humiliated. They were told to sacrifice jobs, milestones, and sanity, only to see leaders exempt themselves from the pain. The government's heavy hand didn't feel like protection, it felt like control, which is exactly what it was. So not only that, but there's a bunch of things that happened during Biden's administration. For example,
the Biden administration is facing fierce backlash for convening a group called the Disinformation Governance Board.
How are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Homeland Security recently rolled out the board, giving few details on how it will function, saying it will examine disinformation about threats, but will not have operational power and will not monitor U.S. citizens. Civil liberties advocates are questioning the idea.
We can't even agree what disinformation is.
On Wednesday, Republican lawmakers pressed Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, calling for the disinformation group to be disbanded, some dubbing it the Truth Police.
I think it's a terrible idea. It communicates to the world that we're going to be spreading propaganda within our country. It's an awful idea.
Mayorkas disagreed, saying the group will not infringe on freedom of speech or privacy rights. He says fighting disinformation is vital to protecting the homeland.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country.
But Senator Shelley Moore Capito called the Disinformation Board Orwellian.
Now is a good time to abandon this ludicrous and much maligned idea. I wonder, when you say that we have operational control of the border, is that definitionally disinformation? Because from a lot of our perspectives, we don't believe that is true.
Yeah, exactly. So the Democrats they want to be like Europe, right? This is happening in Europe all over the place. People are getting arrested for putting, misinformation, not even misinformation, but hate speech online. They want to control electronic communication. And of course, it's all under the name of safety and security and all this stuff. But they want to control. They want to control you. They want to control what the information is. And that's why they teamed up with these big tech companies. Now, if you remember, the executive director for this misinformation group was known, Nina Jankowicz. Yeah, been a while since I've heard her name. She was known, if you remember, for pushing the false claims about the Hunter Biden laptop being Russian disinformation. And later she promoted the Steele dossier, which was obviously discredited, and just making stupid TikToks about things. So, but she was basically a Democratic propagandist who was supposed to be running this thing, and we were all supposed to just accept it and think that was fine and good.
Former Twitter executives admit to making mistakes in blocking a New York Post story about Hunter Biden's laptop just before the 2020 election. They deny they were pressured to do it, though. The admission came to light during a combative congressional hearing. Catherine Herridge has been following this story for us and has more. Catherine, good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. This was the first major public hearing for the Republican-led House Oversight Committee to focus on President Biden and his family. And with new hands on subpoena power, we're likely to see more demands for records soon.
With limited information, Twitter made a mistake.
Former Twitter executives told Congress the social media platform was wrong to suppress the New York Post reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop ahead of the 2020 election.
In hindsight, Twitter should have reinstated the Post account immediately.
Witnesses testified they wanted to avoid a repeat of the 2016 presidential race.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the Russians have engaged in cyber attacks.
When Russian intelligence was blamed for hacking and sharing emails from then candidate Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee.
Twitter noticed activity related to the laptop that, at first glance, bore a lot of similarities to the 2016 Russian hack and leak operation. Our judgment was colored by the experience of 2016.
The former Twitter executives included James Baker, who was the FBI's top lawyer under then Director James Comey. He denied Twitter's decisions were dictated by the Bureau.
Sitting here today, I don't recall speaking to the FBI at all about the Hunter Biden matter.
Or the Biden campaign.
Did anyone from the Biden campaign or the Democratic National Committee direct Twitter to remove or take action against the New York Post story? No.
just a bunch of dishonest fucks. They lie as easy as they breathe air. They wanted to bury the story because it didn't look good for the Democrats, and that's what they were doing. And they knew what they were doing and why they were doing it. And then they act like, oh no, sorry, we didn't know. We were just like trying to be really good people. And that's of course always the game they play. And that's not really what they're doing. What they're doing is they're trying to control, they're trying to censor, they're trying to only let their opinions be let out. And this here just confirms the fear of government working with big tech to decide what the public can say. So we now have seen that these people were total liars. So, it's just crazy. So it wasn't just Twitter, it was Facebook too. They suppressed this article, the New York Post article about Hunter Biden's laptop, calling it Russian disinformation. In even accounts that just shared it were locked for spreading disinformation. Later, mainstream outlets like New York Times and Washington Post admitted the laptop was real. And so voters saw this as a blatant election interference, aided by big tech colluding with government fact checkers. And one more instance of the government being liars, which they did a lot under Biden, lied to us over and over and over. They still think they can get away with that. Not only that, but they also, with Merrick Garland, I'm not even going to get into that. So then they try to kick Trump off of the ticket. Remember when they did that? Tried to get him banned from running in, was it Colorado and Maine and a couple other countries, or a couple other states. And that just, it was so dishonest. They weaponized the courts against their chief political rival. They tried to kick Trump off under the insurrection clause, but then the Supreme Court unanimously said, you can't do that. So the message to the voters was Democrats will bend laws into pretzels to stop opponents that they can't beat fairly. That's the whole point. They didn't want to fight fair. They wanted to be underhanded and dirty. And they wanted to accuse the Republicans of doing that the whole time. So, not only that, but then you get into the whole cancel culture issue. So you get into the cultural problems. And that was a whole nother thing that was problematic. All the way from actors getting fired to professors, across the country losing their jobs over old tweets and classroom comments. It's just a crazy time.
What is meant by words and phrases. So I think it's appropriate for us to sort of figure out what that phrase cancel culture means. Is it new or is it something that's been around?
I'm going to fast forward this a little. Here, let's go.
Education, understanding. I think we could all benefit from the proper balance of those ideals. How we treat the minority matters because they may not be in the minority forever. Most of all, I hope we can apply the same standard of fairness to others that we want applied to us. Joining me now, former Congresswoman from the great state of Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard. Hey, Tulsi, how are you?
Aloha, my friend. It's good to talk to you as always.
Likewise. All right. I used to turn to you when we were serving together for guidance. Tell me what the cancel culture is and why we should be concerned with it.
Well, you rightly started this conversation talking about freedom. when you look at the foundation of our democracy, it is based on this ideal, this principle of freedom, freedom of speech, freedom for every single one of us to be able to share our ideas and debate them, to argue them, to agree or to disagree, to pick and choose in this marketplace of ideas those that we deem to be right or wrong, to be superior or inferior, and even for those ideas that may be misleading or dangerous, that in this free marketplace, we have the right to then defeat those ideas with superior ones.
Exactly. And that's why the Republican Party has become the party of ideas and the open-minded ones, because we really believe in free speech. And the left does not. The Democratic Party became censorious. They sent their mobs out to shut everybody down who disagreed with what they wanted to be the official narrative. They're still trying to do it, which is not going to work because there's just far too much access to information. They still try to guilt. They still try to shame. They still try to shut down topics of conversation, but it's just not working anymore. And that's why people are leaving the Democrats. They don't want to be, Americans don't want to be stuck in a cult like that where you have to fall in line or else you're bad. They want to be able to express their opinions and to explore. Now, have you seen, there was an article put out recently where it compared something like the diversity of ideas within the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and it would use the scatter plot. And the Democratic scatter plot was tiny. There was not a very large diversity of ideas. They were all basically lockstep. And the Republican scatter plot was massive and expansive. And there's a variety of different ideas and opinions and constant debating and talking and conversing about all the different options and what's best and what isn't. And that's just not the case in the Democratic Party anymore. It's just, this is what it is. And if you don't like it, you're bad. Not open-minded at all, not interested in dialogue or debate. And when you go and you ask some of these extreme liberals to explain their ideas, they have no clue because they've never been challenged, because they live in this weird little bubble where everybody's in lockstep. So, you know, the cancel culture thing was just trying to shut people down. It wasn't just like celebrities and professors or anything. It was like a truck driver in New Jersey was fired after a video showed him making jokes years before. Employees across industries saw people getting canceled all the time for decades old social media posts dug up by the internet mobs. Workers lived with the constant fear that something stupid they said in 2012 could destroy their livelihoods in 2022. So cancellation wasn't about accountability, as they claim. It was about control. People saw it as mob justice, not fair justice, and that's why they wanted nothing to do with it. And they wanted to go over to the side where you could express yourself and you could express your opinion. And not only that, then you get things like the pronoun stuff, the pronoun police. You know, for example, in Virginia, in 2021, a teacher, Tanner Cross, was suspended for stating at a school board meeting that he could not affirm pronouns that go against biology. He was suspended. Parents watched in shock as someone was punished just for voicing an opinion about children's education. A court later ruled in his favor, but the chill remained. Educators learned that disagreement would cost them their jobs. And that's the whole point of the cancel culture, is to intimidate people into falling in line and to not having their own opinions and to not voicing them. And it's disgusting. So multiple employees at corporations have been disciplined or fired for misgendering, even when accidental. The threat of losing a career over a single slip of tongue felt extreme to millions of Americans, especially older workers not used to new pronoun rules and all these weird little cultural signals. In some schools, kids as young as middle school were reprimanded for using wrong pronouns. Some were even investigated for bullying despite no intent to harm. So it felt less like respecting people and more like forced and compelled speech, telling people they had what they had to say or else face punishment. Let's take a look at what Bill Burr had to say about all this.
Women that want to push this and men who are bitches. It's like these men that don't like aggressive. They don't like aggressive men. They don't like manly men. And so they push it as well.
No, because they're aggressive and they're controlling and they want to run shit. And that's because that's the thing where, like, if you really look at their agenda, when they say the future is feminine, that's not inclusive. And they're all about, oh, make this more inclusive. It's like, no, let us in so we can take it over and then we'll push you down. Is the psychology of the kind of person that goes after that, someone that's after like power. I'm not saying the average woman is like that. My wife is a feminist and she's into like inclusive shit. But like people who are spearheading stuff,
yes,
like those people are wired the same way. Like, you know, I mean,
a dominator is.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And there's going to be no room for you. It's going to be like, think the way, like a lot of that so-called progressives, extreme left is think the way we think, say what we say, or we will fucking destroy you.
Pull up.
Bam. Nailed it. That's exactly right. All while claiming to be the inclusive, open-minded, loving, caring ones. So not only that, but also they're just in general, they want to police all kinds of language and change and do all kinds of weird things. So even now I noticed that they've started calling illegal immigrants, well, they've been calling them undocumented workers, which they're not all working, but now unauthorized immigrants. They're just unauthorized. They just can't handle it. Each new term sounds softer, as though changing the word changed the legality of crossing the border. So it's gaslighting through vocabulary designed to blur the lines between legal and illegal. Or they'll refer to them as immigrants. Oh, why do you hate immigrants? Nobody hates all immigrants. Don't be stupid. They were just talking about the illegal immigrants who are in our country, causing problems, using resources, or like referring to a mother as a birthing person. You know, stupid shit like that. And that's all for transgender ideology. So now everybody has, in hospitals, they call the mom the birthing person. So stupid. You know, supposedly it's supposed to be inclusive, but it feels insulting, reducing motherhood to this sterile bureaucratic function. Or the mess with the Latin X, you know? A bunch of white people decided that Hispanics were now going to be referred to as Latinx because they didn't want it to be Latino and Latina because those are gendered. Totally disrespecting their actual language, that their language is gendered, and not even asking them if they thought that would resonate with the community. I saw numerous videos where people would be like, well, I don't even know what Latinx is. I would know. I'm Hispanic. You know, just like totally out of touch, trying to tell people what the heck to do. It's like cultural imperialism from the elites, white progressives inventing words and forcing them onto communities. So Americans, we saw the language of daily life was hijacked, and it was school-marmed, and it was controlled, and words that we grew up with were now problematic. And we were expected to just accept this weird jargon overnight or be called bigots. So they didn't just cancel people, they tried to cancel common sense. If they can fire you for a tweet, punish your kid for a pronoun, and rewrite words you use for family, what's left of free speech? So not only that, but then came the crime and the riots and the double standards. Not only that, let's take a look.
The media gaslit the American people. The media gaslit the American people for all of 2020 as the riots unfolded. They did not give you the full story. I was there. George Floyd, Kyle Rittenhouse, Rayshard Brooks, Chaz in Seattle. I saw all the riots with my own eyes. Windshields being smashed, giant rocks that were being thrown, businesses that were starting to be looted. The crowd started to become hostile. All the cops were trapped and surrounded. Police were being ordered to retreat. I experienced the tear gas. I experienced the smoke. This was very real to me.
Yeah, so this is what's really going on with these protests. So remember the BLM stuff that was mostly peaceful riots while there's a building on fire behind the guy. So CNN infamously aired a live shot with the fiery but mostly peaceful protest. That is just so funny. But really, they weren't peaceful. They caused over $2 billion in damages, the most expensive period of unrest in U.S. history. And the Democrats didn't denounce it. Small business owners were not protected. Many of them who were minorities, their businesses were burned down, were looted. They lost everything. And then you think those people stayed Democrats after that? Or you think they went looking for alternatives? The people who just let lawlessness run on these Democratic streets, they lost their support. Small business owners, were screwed. And, Americans saw the establishment defund to defund, it turns into chaos. And all the innocent people who are not criminals get abandoned. And the cities turn into war zones. Then there's the defund the police. In Minneapolis and New York and Los Angeles, Seattle, they cut their budgets like the police were the problem. Everybody knew that was a crazy thing to say. Within a year, violent crime surged in many of these cities. Homicides in Minneapolis spiked by nearly 30%. New York saw shootings rise dramatically after cutting $1 billion from the NYPD budget. Thousands of officers resigned or retired early, citing hostility and lack of support. That's how dumb. You think the people living in these cities are going to stay Democrats after you do that to them? Maybe the rioters will. Because it's just like what's going on today. It seems like the Democrats are dedicated to siding with the criminals over the common people who are not criminals. Like what's happening in DC. The left's losing their mind over Trump sending in the National Guard to reduce the crime. The people who are actually living in these areas who aren't criminals are happy about it. But the white liberals just can't have that. They've got to have the crime going on for some reason. They love it. They think that there's some other solution to it. Like if we just say nice words, they'll stop committing crime. And they totally screw over the people who are normal people who just want to live their lives and go to work and pay their bills and live in their house and walk down the street and not have to worry about getting carjacked and all that, which are totally reasonable things for a person to want. So the J6 thing, they pounded the drums to that. But they never admitted anything about BLM and how bad it was. So they called Jan 6, 9/11 is comparable to Pearl Harbor, the darkest day in American history. Meanwhile, the 2020 BLM riots left dozens dead, police precincts burned, courthouses under siege, but that was righteous anger, so it was okay. Thousands of J6 participants faced harsh federal charges, pretrial detention, lengthy sentences. By contrast, many BLM rioters were bailed out by funds promoted by politicians. In cities like Portland, prosecutors dropped hundreds of riot-related crimes. Americans saw the two tiers of justice, one for people aligned with the left and another for the people on the right. The law was not the law. It was more like politics with handcuffs. And then they gaslit us about how bad the crime was. In San Francisco, Walgreens, CVS were chaining or locking up their toothpaste and deodorant and baby formula because shoplifting had become so rampant. Videos circulated of thieves walking out with armfuls of goods in broad daylight. Now a lot of these places are just shutting down completely because the crime's so out of control, because the Democratic leadership doesn't give a fuck. So families saw their stores close then in their neighborhoods. Jobs were lost. Entire areas turned into retail deserts. Ordinary citizens felt like their leaders were telling them not to believe their own eyes. They were telling them, no, things are good, things are great, crime's going down, everything's good, and just because they're redefining the terms of what crime is. But the people who live there are not morons, they know. And so is it surprising that they would leave the Democratic Party? Look for an alternative because they obviously had been let down. When people see crime daily, but are told it isn't real, they stop trusting their leaders and start voting them out. And that's what happened. And then there's the whole woke thing, of course. Things like Target with their tuck, they're right when you walk in, they got the transgender, the pride merch. And, it's not like.
I want to ask you about something else that's happening.
Let me play you this video here.
Tonight, Target is removing some items from its LGBTQ pride collection after threats and what the company describes as, quote, volatile circumstances. Fox 11's Ed Laskos live with reaction tonight. Ed.
And no doubt about it, Target is a retailer very much in damage control tonight, admitting confrontational behavior aimed at its team members, its workers inside its stores, creating volatile circumstances like the exploding thread on social media calling for an outright boycott of Target. Watch.
There's no coming back from this, Target. You have dug a grave. You are dead. You are buried. You are finished. It is over.
From TikTok, just some of the social media backlash making Target stores the latest target in a consumer boycott. The uproar centers around an LGBTQ controversy and the June Pride Month displays in Target stores nationwide. There are new Pride items bringing controversy, from tuck-friendly bathing suits for transgenders to mugs with the slogan gender fluid, to other more controversial Pride merchandise now out from a European designer that expresses satanic views. Check out this t-shirt. See its slogan there. It reads, Satan respects pronouns. That, along with other merchandise showing skulls and horns, all igniting a consumer firestorm.
You signed a designer who worships and believes in Satan, who is all things evil. And once you do that, you have taken love out of the equation.
So yeah, probably a bad idea to go that extreme. These leaders of these large corporations were just so out of touch with what the actual their consumers were even like. I don't understand how they could be so out of touch. This was not nearly as out of touch though as the Bud Light, Dylan Mulvaney scenario. That was that was just wild. You know, let's take a look. Let you remember this?
Bud Light is trying to regain its spot as America's top-selling beer after sales dropped 23% last month compared to the same period last year. Analysts blame the plunge on a Bud Light ad posted on social media by a transgender TikTok star.
This month, I celebrated my day 365 of womanhood, and Bud Light sent me possibly the best gift ever, a can with my face on it. Check out my Instagram story to see how you can enjoy March Madness with Bud Light and maybe win some money too.
So many conservatives boycotted Bud Light after the ad went public, and when the parent company tried to distance itself from it, it caused backlash with the LGBTQ plus community. Wall Street Journal reporter Jennifer Maloney joins us now to talk about this. So we should clarify, Jennifer, for people to understand. And Dylan makes it clear in her TikTok video there that Bud Light sent her a can. She was celebrating a milestone, and Bud Light sent her a can, which she then herself posted on her Instagram. I think the language by some right-wing news sites and folks and conservative people on social media has been that this was a campaign by Bud Light. It was not a campaign in the sense that they spend millions of dollars, they put together an ad budget, and this is what they're doing, right?
Right. It was not a campaign. And this can was one single can sent to Dylan Mulvaney as a gift. It was not commercially available on store shelves.
So let's talk about what it seems like it's turning out to be pretty significant backlash for the company. There have been other companies who, you know, with June being Pride Month, have done all sorts of things.
Which is different again.
And there's been backlash.
Right.
But Bud Light in particular seems to be suffering kind of the most severe backlash.
Yeah, I mean, does this really surprise anybody who knows working class people who drink beer? You know, that's like, they're not interested in this kind of stuff. But, you know, so then you get the whole gender ideology in schools with, especially in California, New Jersey, and elsewhere, policies were implemented allowing schools to socially transition children without notifying the parents. Parents discovered their kids were being called by new identities at school while the family was kept in the dark. Then you get drag queen story hour and performances, where libraries and even some school events hosted drag performers as family-friendly events. This is how out of touch as a party these people are. And then they deny biology in their curriculum. Multiple school boards and textbooks began including claims like men can get pregnant and stupid shit like that, and pushing gender identity as fluid fact rather than contested ideology. Parents who raised objections at board meetings were sometimes labeled bigoted or even treated as potential domestic terrorists. So parents felt sidelined and betrayed, believing the state was inserting itself between them and their children's upbringing, rewriting biology and pushing ideology over education, and rightly so. And then not only that, but then you have the pushing of critical race theory. Lessons rooted in critical race theory encourage separating students by race into privileged and oppressed. In some schools, white children were asked to apologize for their whiteness, while students of color were told they were systematically disadvantaged, regardless of their individual circumstances. Math and English programs were altered to reduce emphasis on right answers and merit-based grading, with some educators labeling punctuality, grammar, and objectivity as white supremacy culture. So families felt betrayed by dishonesty and worried their kids were being taught to judge others by skin color, because these Democrat racists were trying to force everybody to do that, rather than by character. And then you get the movies and you get the woke media, corporate stuff, where Star Wars and Marvel, they're doing all this stupid shit where they have to put in girl boss themes and subvert classical heroes. in order to deliver political lectures and ideological preaching rather than compelling storylines. Even kids' content got repurposed, like Scooby-Doo even. Velma was they turned Velma into a progressive lecture series full of race, gender, and sexuality commentary. Audiences just wanted adventure, comedy, or nostalgia. And not to walk away and feel like they've been scolded. And the box office reflected it because they lost a ton of money, like the dipshits that they are. So they turned storytelling into activism, and people stopped showing up. So not only that, but you had the more of the elite hypocrisy and looking down their nose on people. Things like Hillary Clinton referring to Trump supporters as deplorables. Just highlighting how little they think of people who are not in the elitist circles. She called them a basket of deplorables, racists, sexists, homophobes. It became a political dynamite, fueling resentment in the working class communities who felt dismissed and insulted by somebody who was asking for their vote. This is how out of touch these morons are. Pundits often deride the middle of the country as flyover country, implying rural and middle-class America was backward, bigoted, or irrelevant. For families in Ohio, Nebraska, or West Virginia, it felt like people running the country were laughing at them on late-night TV. Voters concluded that the political and media class not only ignored their struggles, jobs, inflation, opioids, education, but actively looked down on them. They didn't get that impression from Trump. Not only that, you got the hypocrisy, like John Kerry in his private jet. He was Biden's climate envoy. And was repeatedly spotted arriving at global climate summits on a private jet, emitting more carbon in one trip than most families do in an entire year. And then he lied about it.
I just don't agree with
this.
You know, to just be grossly generalistic,
not that dope. This dope.
I just don't agree with your facts, which began with the presentation of one of the most outrageously persistent lies that I hear, which is this private jet. We don't own a private jet. I don't own a private jet. I personally have never owned a private jet.
That's a lie.
A few moments later.
You just testified under oath that you never owned a private jet. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record article here from February 15th of 2023. The John Kerry family private jet was sold shortly after accusations of climate hypocrisy.
That's just too good. He's lying bastard. You know, just that kind of stuff. People are sick of it. It's so dishonest. Regular people see this crap as rules for thee, not for me. Elites, even those pushing climate alarm, were living in luxury while demanding sacrifice from working families already struggling to afford groceries and gas. So, you know, how's the Democrat Party going to deal with this kind of stuff? And then not only that, but then you talk about the immigration and the huge surge of people, and how in favor of that the Democratic Party still is. And now how they're being nutcases trying to stop us from getting criminals out of the country. You know, putting everybody's loved ones in danger potentially. Probably not, but people don't even like the potential of their safety being threatened. So when Trump left, there was about 74,000 monthly crossings. And then during Biden, it peaked at 300,000. Millions and millions of people that we don't know. And then not only that, but then there's just other things like cost of living things. I think Biden On his very first day in office, President Biden revoked the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline, a project expected to deliver 800,000 barrels of Canadian crude oil per day. Thousands of union jobs vanished overnight, and energy independence took a hit. By 2022, average U.S. gas prices spiked to over $5 a gallon nationwide. For ordinary families, it felt like Washington declared war on affordable energy. And then there was the inflation gaslighting. As soon as prices rose in 2021, the White House and Federal Reserve repeatedly assured the public that inflation was transitory. Instead, inflation persisted for over 2 years, peaking at 9.1% in June of 2022, the highest in 40 years. Grocery bills doubled, every staple went up. Families saw weekly grocery bills jump by 30 to 40%, while hearing politicians insist the economy was strong. Biden declared the economy was the strongest in the world in 2023, while polls showed the majority of Americans felt they were worse off financially than before he took office. People weren't just squeezed, they were gaslit. That's the Democrats' favorite pastime, is gaslighting people. They were told to ignore what they saw with their own eyes. Then there's the homelessness that people had to endure. Cities like San Francisco, Portland, Los Angeles, and Seattle, sidewalks turned into open-air drug camps. Tent cities stretched for blocks, and open drug use became normalized. Progressive mayors insisted their policies were compassionate, refusing to crack down on vagrancy or crime. But the result was chaos. Compassion that looked and smelled like decay. San Francisco even handed out free drug paraphernalia in the name of harm reduction. The rhetoric of compassion collided with the reality of piss, feces, and needles on city sidewalks. If that's how Democrats are running your city, do you think that you're going to want to stay a Democrat? Then there was election rule chaos. COVID became the excuse for rapid changes, expanding mail-in ballots, drop boxes, ballot harvesting, reduced signature verifications. And they claim it was all necessary. But this made Americans lose a lot of faith in the fairness of elections. There's a war on gender roles and toxic masculinity. Schools, media, and HR departments pushed the idea that traditional masculinity was harmful. Ads and TV mock dads as useless buffoons. Universities ran workshops on toxic masculinity. Men and boys felt attacked simply for being male. Fathers were dismissed, and young men were left without positive role models. Instead of lifting men up, the woke culture tried to break them down. And then there's the diversity over competence with the DEI nonsense. Corporations and government agencies bragged about firsts and how this was the first, this, that, and the other thing. And ordinary Americans worried about safety and excellence were dismissed and told they were bigots. They expanded the education indoctrination. Instead of learning core skills, students were told normal academic discipline was a form of bias, and parents felt schools cared more about ideology than education. Democrats declared democracy is on the ballot when Republicans ran. Biden labeled opponents as threats to democracy. When Democrats won, they declared democracy strong. When they lost or were challenged, they cried that democracy was dying. The word democracy became a weapon, a euphemism for one-party rule. And then there was the sports stuff with the kneeling and the national anthem. Sports stopped being a refuge. They became another battlefield. As all of these things combine, and many more things, and I don't hear any of these Democratic pundits addressing any of these kinds of issues. One here and there, but this is the comprehensive reason why people are getting the hell out of the Democratic Party They don't want anything to do with what they've got going on there, because everything they do is at some extreme weird position. Whether it's supporting crime or gaslighting people about facts of the economy or Trump being Hitler and all this kind of stuff. People are tired of it, sick of it, and it's done. Woke is dead. All right, guys, that's all I've got. Be sure to join me. I'll be back on Monday. So, see ya.